Hey, y'all, and welcome back to another episode of the Minor Detail Podcast. I'm your host, Khaila Ariel, and I am so grateful that you are tuning into today's episode. I am very excited to introduce you all to today's guest. And as I'm sure you know by now, any guest of the podcast is truly a friend of mine at this point, okay? Joining us today is co-founder of New Orleans-based creative marketing agency, Jordan Rhea. My girl Jordan is truly a Jill of all trades, and I'm just so excited for you all to hear from her, to meet her, to learn from her. So without further ado, Jordan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Khaila. Hey, everyone. I'm super excited to be a part of the Minor Detail podcast today. I don't know, it's been a great time to see you get this going and start recording. I'm really happy that everything you told me about, I don't know, a year and a half ago or so has really worked out. So I just want to say congratulations. Thank you for having me. I love listening to the podcast since the first one dropped.
Well, I so appreciate you. And, before we jump into things, because honestly, now, of course, I need the people to know how we even know each other. But how are you feeling today? Let's start there.
I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. Today was productive. This week has been good. There's been a lot of things, staying busy, coming off of traveling with family, also, moving pieces, our team kind of moving around, things like that. But everything is going well.
Well, I will segue by, I guess, giving a little background off the record, because I was like, we'll just jump right in. People don't need to hear our story, but I changed my mind because people need stories and they need to know, what the behind the scenes of things that happen. And so I guess rewind, like 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, I reached out to Jordan because I knew that I wanted to launch the Minor Detail podcast. And I knew everything that it would take to kind of get it off the ground from a marketing, branding perspective. And I had dabbled in strategy just a little bit, which is so funny given like the fact that where I am now professionally, but I also really wanted to get a bit more, depth in strategy. And so I reached out to Jordan and her partner, Rashad, and I was like, hey, y'all, I really want to get this project off the ground. I love what y'all are doing. And I really think that you guys are the ones to help me do so. And so over the course of probably like 2 to 3 months, we just really, truly banged out a game plan. And it wasn't until a year after that, probably, where I finally hit them up after all of, deliverables were done and we got everything together. And I was like, guys, I'm actually launching this thing. And that is where season 1 of the podcast came from. That is where the beautiful cover art and just the inspiration for all of my graphics and marketing materials came from, that you guys have told me you love so much. So number one, shout out to Raire Label. They're literally the best marketing creative agency, in my opinion, especially to be like a smaller business, right? Y'all are the best. And this is coming from someone that works in advertising, working with like the biggest brands globally, the largest teams globally. It's cool, but it's nothing like working with your own people and really just understanding one another and getting one another. And there's so many things that I can't wait to dive into in the conversation just about experiences and like getting to this point. But I just had to let you know how much I appreciate you, Jordan, because I don't think I would be here if it wasn't without you.
Thank you. That's so much love. Thank you so much. I remember when you first reached out and you knew what you wanted. And from that point on, I knew you were going to get everything together, start recording, and then publish this. So thank you for letting us be a part of the process with you.
No, totally. So let's dive in. I want to talk a little bit about what sparked your desire to start up your own creative marketing agency. Y'all, at the time when I first reached out to them, I had no idea everything that went into the business, because I think at the time I was looking for jobs and I was just trying to figure out what my next move would be in my career. And fast forward a few months after working with them, I actually, like I said, I ended up landing my first role in advertising, which is a very similar atmosphere. And now I think you guys are crazy, honestly. I think you're crazy and inspiring, but it's a tall feat is what I'll say. It's not an easy task to get to this point. So what inspired you to get here? Like, was there a moment where you're like, I want to run a marketing agency? Or were you just, was there work that inspired you? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. on one hand, I'm kind of 0 out of 10, do not recommend. And on the other hand, I'm very much 11 out of 10. Everybody should do this. So catch me on any given day, I might have different advice. I think what prompted me to get into this, it's going to sound wild. I guess this will come full circle maybe throughout our conversation, but I'm just going to say my competitiveness, and maybe in spite of me being a competitor, I saw things happening around me from a production standpoint, and I didn't even realize that I was absorbing it like I was, and that it was even production. And it was people moving things from an idea to execution. So I'm watching these things happen around me, and I really just wanted to try my shot at it. And I was like, I think I can do this better, and had no idea what I was getting myself into, and had to learn a lot about it in order to be able to do it. But I would say competitively, I just wanted to get in the game and basically shoot some shots, for lack of a better way to put it.
Well, I think that that makes total sense. I think one thing that stood out a lot to me when working with you guys was really just, and I also really appreciated this, someone with not much knowledge about this space, like I mentioned, but someone who's very organized, who's a planner. You mentioned I knew exactly what I wanted, which thank you, because I felt like I didn't. I really appreciated how organized and professional you were in your approach, and especially like your presentation. And this is down to like the decks. This is down to round 1 edits, round 2 edits, like how you're organizing and sharing notes. And I think people often like underestimate the importance of those things, right? When it's when you are trying to win new business, when you are working with clients and kind of, you know, build up that reputation. At what point did you realize implementing certain fundamentals like those things were really key for taking the business to new heights?
Probably a little bit of my perfectionism and wanting all the information to be very organized, and really believing that things can be clean and neat, and finding a way to communicate that with a client who is not in the same room with us. So many things, especially when we're talking about 2020, were over the phone, over a computer, over a video chat, and wanting them to feel a part of the process, because we realized that it's really the minor details that make someone feel comfortable and trust you with their project. Because a lot of these brands and businesses, these ideas are people's brainchilds, and you want to take care of them as if it was your own. And we really try to do that. Internally, we use the word touch points. So at any given moment, we know that a client is experiencing us through these touch points, even if they are virtual. And we must deliver that standard. We must set that tone. And we're really proud to do that. It matters a lot.
100%. And I think it makes the biggest impression. Do you feel like, because you mentioned earlier your competitiveness, you mentioned seeing things happening in production and going from, you know, idea to implementation to just like a full blown like execution, and then obviously the result. Do you feel like in your previous experience before the agency was started, you recognized other people just not doing it so well and maybe you could do it better? Were you ever in spaces that kind of inspired you to almost one up, or like what was your initial moment where you're like, okay, I can do this, and here's why?
You know, the first thing that comes to mind is over the past, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, how content on Instagram in particular has become more and more, I don't know, inundated with creators sharing their messages through this platform, and being able to be savvy enough on Instagram to have momentum. And I felt like I did have a good, you know, following, a smaller scale following, but very engaged followership, but not knowing how to create the content. This is, you know, some years ago now, but it kind of forced a lot of us to figure out how to become content creators. And to kind of circle all of this back in, it's just the opportunity that I felt we had as a young agency and I mean, I say a young agency, but brand new, to kind of figure out how to connect all of this. And everything boils down to branding and marketing at the end of the day. You know, you're positioning yourself as a personal brand, or you're positioning, maybe you have a company or you're starting a nonprofit, and everything boils down to that. So how are we going to communicate this? And you asked if I saw other people that I felt weren't doing it well. And yeah, like I definitely felt like I saw some things. I would do that differently if I had that, you know, project, or if I had that idea, or what can we do to make this idea more sustainable, right? That's kind of how I would, you know, like circle that back and share that I felt, even from like a training perspective, you know, like if you ever gotten a job before and someone wasn't able to really direct you, and, you know, there might have been confusion around like, what's happening? What does this mean? How, like, it's just communications. Figuring out how to do all of that has been fascinating.
Yeah, it really is, because it's an experience that is kind of like trial and error. Everything's on fire all the time, but it's like this calmness about just working through it at the same time. Because you said with being a brand new agency or being young, it's kind of, yeah, like you're learning as you go. And I can imagine that that might be a bit challenging at times. Kind of circling back to your, some days you're like 0 out of 10 wouldn't recommend, but what do you feel like have been some of the bigger challenges with starting your own business, or even like in the entrepreneurial space? Because technically you're still considered an entrepreneur. Are there any moments, or is there any moment that just stands out to you?
I think something that I could not truly understand until I had done this for a while was the constant iteration, the constant changes. I know now that one week we may need to move a certain way, but then a week or two later, maybe a month later, things are different. And it could be anything from, you know, just capacity to, you know, a new team member or missing a team member, you know, just whatever happens, it's always changing. And I think I never anticipated that. I couldn't have anticipated that. At the beginning, you think, okay, once I learn this process, is going to be solid. I'm never going to have to go back to it. And it's like, nah, actually, you have to keep growing, doing it again, fixing it. It's going to break, teaching it to someone else. And then you find other things that are missing. I think the constant iteration is definitely something that has been the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think I would agree. And man, teaching is like a whole, it's a whole thing within itself. Because I want to come back to that, because I know one of the big, I think, points of interest in topics like these, oftentimes for like growing businesses, growing entrepreneurs, is like bringing on a team, and what that looks like in terms of scaling, and how, you know, it's even time, and even down to like being able to pay people, right? Because I think that's the reality. Is like, sure, we have internships and people can work for free, but like, when do you know that it's time? When do you get to that point where, obviously, I'm sure you're like, okay, we need help, but I guess what made you comfortable with taking that next step in building your team?
Yeah, you sometimes know when it's going to be time. I when you need help. And sometimes you need help from softwares and different almost soft skills that you can develop that can help you get through some of the entrepreneur lessons and the challenges. But then there's moments where it does make sense for you to scale and you need another person. I'm not so sure that I am well enough vetted to speak on how to get the right person, because that's really tough. But just welcoming them in, you know, having a culture that's already established has been really big for us. And it's allowed us to work with great people, whether it's full-time, part-time, it's been on, you know, like internships, or it's been contractual and project-based. We've been able to work with a lot of great creatives. But yeah, it's very difficult figuring out what you need if you might be just needing software. There's a difference between like okay, I need to be able to invest my time and learn how to use a project management system. It's not necessarily that I need an assistant, because when you do bring somebody in, you're very much responsible for making sure that that agreement, whatever that looks like, or that salary is taken care of.
Yes, my like not worst fear, but it kind of keeps me up at night. I get a little anxious about that. But I think that's the realities, right? It's like I always kind of flip the script and I'm like, okay, I know what value I bring in certain environments and I know what my expectations are based on said value. But when it's flipped, and it's turned around,
how do I
I'm like,
approach this?
yes, how do I approach this? I have to trust this person with my baby. I have to be able to, just have faith enough that this thing will be executed not my way, but a good enough way.
Yeah.
and then like you can already even hear me talking through it, like good enough versus my way. That sounds crazy, but I think it's the reality, right? And I also feel like it made me want to ask, as you were talking about like the clients that you guys are working with, because a challenge that some agencies face can be client based, the types of client, team, and their working style and their personalities and what their expectations were when they came to an agency for X, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Support. How has that been for you guys in terms of working with specific clients? Are you niching down at all in specific areas to kind of ensure that you're working on the projects that are fulfilling you? What are your thoughts?
I would say that's part of that constant iteration that we're talking about, is learning through experience and learning through a lot of repetition where your agency provides the best support and doing more of that. And I will, transparently, there's maybe been projects here or there that we were like, man, we weren't as connected to that as we would have liked to have been. So how do we make sure that we don't miss drop balls, right, going forward? So part of that is the constant iteration that I've learned to kind of just like sit in. Every moment is a chance to get better or do something differently, try something, in a way that you haven't tried it before. I would say that we are honing in on specific industries that we want to be most available for, that we believe we provide the best support for. At the beginning, though, like that, you really kind of can't say no at the very beginning. And especially me, as someone, I had never ran a business before. I really didn't, like, long story short, Raire Label made its introduction as an event production company in a way, and we quickly evolved into a marketing agency, moving more into a lifestyle agency where all of this 360 experience as a creative, as a brand, as an organization, it, just really matters, and getting to, just the deeper layers of life and how work and life are so blended.
No, I think that's good, because it almost, like, you almost have to have those experiences to be able to understand like what you do and don't want, just like anything in life. It's like, okay, if I'm dating, I know, or I think I like this type of person, I date the wrong type of person, all right, boom, these characteristics are out the window, because it's like, I don't ever want to deal with that again. And it's almost like that with client relationships as well, or even like the types of brands, because if you're passionate about, of like impacting a specific type of audience, I think that that's fair, because I feel like both sides of the spectrum, or both ends, should be fulfilled in some way. Obviously, I'm, as a business, fulfilled because you're paying me and like, I'm receiving that income. But also, like, when you're creative, you actually are sensitive about your work, your art, and the way that comes to life. So I think that that's awesome. And I always love to hear when people start to get a better understanding of who they want to work with and how they want to work with them,
I would say that I didn't, unless you have kind of some of those reps and you worked in and through situations that weren't the best for you, it's hard. You won't come out on the other side like, okay, I want to do a little bit more of something, or walk a different, direction. And I think too, with clients, being transparent really from the get-go, because even though there's, a transaction and there's money being exchanged, it is still creative work that's on the line, and we're all invested. We all kind of have skin in the game. and we get really close to a lot of the projects that we work on. So just managing expectations from the front, being transparent, and putting everything down on paper so you also aren't scope creeping too much.
Man, don't. Yes, that's stressful, man. Don't even get me started. So let's rewind a little bit, because I feel like, as someone who might not be as well versed in this industry, or like how you even get to this point, I know your background a little bit in terms of like, like where you're from, and kind of how you got to that point, playing basketball, even doing some like brand ambassadorship type of activities before, actually starting the business. Do you feel like this would always be your path, or were you kind of surprised by your own growth trajectory when you got to this point?
I for certain think that I had an inclination to maybe own a business one day. I did not know really what business that was, right? For instance, I went to cosmetology school and I cut hair for a couple years, and I'm thinking, oh, like I'll own my own salon one day, or I'll start that. What will that look like? I didn't get too far in that, but they were thoughts that ran across my mind. But owning and working with my partner Rashad with Raire Label, I really couldn't have seen that coming. To be completely honest. So yeah, like I would say it's certainly a surprise.
That's cool though. I was wondering what you would say, because I think that entrepreneurship and like building your own brand and all of those things have obviously, well, I'm not going to say obviously, but we know have just become like really popular. I think when I was graduating college, or like even in that era of like 2017, it was just like, don't work for corporate, like be an entrepreneur, have your own, you know what I mean? Like it was just becoming like a really popular thing. And so I'm curious or interested to know, like, when did you get that inkling? You know what I mean? That inkling, like, when did you feel like this is something that you wanted to do? And I think that's also why I asked you earlier if you felt like people were just doing it wrong.
That's interesting, because it wasn't so much, I don't think it was so much of like, I want to be a business owner, right? I was just like, I want to produce. And even the time, I don't think I had that language for it. I was just like, I want to try to do this, and that. And it happened that I made, I guess, myself a business owner. I don't know that it was that was attracted to me, but I can totally see how that has been portrayed and kind of glorified. Being on, start your own thing. And that's going to take you only so far. You really want to, I think, find something that you're connected to so you can really see it through. And that's where I felt the inkling to get started.
Yeah, that's good. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's dig a bit deeper into having a connection to something, because let me tell you, the past and in my story and background is totally different. Like I am a full-time corporate employee, and I also work on things part-time, and I also am, building a podcast and a brand within the minor detail. And sometimes I'm like, this is too much. Okay. Like I don't have enough time in the day, but I'm just so drawn to the minor detail as a brand, and like the community I want to serve and the community I want to grow and build, even beyond like the vanity things on social, right? Like I have even had more of a realization lately that I can do without that. Like that is a piece of the puzzle, but it's not like the entire, you know what I mean? Like that's not the entire motivation behind what the minor detail is. But for someone who is finding trouble feeling not necessarily committed to, but like motivated to build, or motivated to actually like build a thing, what would you tell them?
I would share my thoughts around motivation that you can't wait until you're motivated to do whatever it is that you want to do. I think you have to make a commitment to self-educate. I think you really have to just commit to taking the baby steps, because like you mentioned before, okay, there could be this overwhelm and like not having enough time to do all of these different things. And that's very true. Like, you're not going to have enough time, period, for all of the ideas that happen in our heads every day. We're not going to have enough time. It's just not possible. And to be careful with even managing your own expectations around, hey, I'm going to commit to self-educating, myself around this concept or this organization type, whatever it is that you want to do for 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. And I'm not sure if I pulled this from somewhere, but I really believe if you spend about 45 minutes a day doing something, whatever it is that you're after, spend 45 dedicated minutes to that. All those incremental days, those minutes really add up. And the next thing you know, you're like, oh, wow, like I have registered for my business or have, released a book or published a book, whatever that looks like for you. Try to break it down into small steps and don't wait to be motivated. Some days, like, the inspiration is not going to be there.
Yeah, that's so real. And I think that that's a hump that I had to give over within itself, that and just like everything being perfect or me knowing things all the way before trying them out. Because I think that a part of that incremental learning or trial and error kind of provides like cushion a little bit for like the negative, not negative thoughts, but the overthinking around like how to do a thing. I think when you put things into practice, you almost like the dopamine, right? That you feel, it kind of starts to, it pushes you along a little bit more because you're like, okay, I sent this email today. Like I want to do a little bit more. And then like the next day you're doing something else. And I think that that's really interesting that you mentioned one, the fact that motivation is not really enough to fuel. I think we all kind of learn that discipline is really what carries you through. Sometimes I think that people within our generation, or maybe it's not even generation, it's just like within the beginning stages, just have a hard time. And this is something I was like super convicted about. And that's why I feel like I can speak on it confidently, but have a hard time committing to the baby steps because the expectation is just for instant gratification and for it to be done right away, for it to be done correctly. And if it's not, it's just like, well, I don't even want to try. I don't even want to do it.
Yeah, I'll share an experience that I had that helped me. And we all have to just try stuff because we're going to learn at any given moment through just our own experiences. But one of my experiences and something that opened my eyes was, as a brand ambassador, I was in a contract with a brand for a year, and I learned a lot and did a lot of really, really great things. I remember this one moment where the request was for me to post something to my feed that I was like, this isn't going to perform well on my feed. Like, why would they set me up like this? And I'm not going to get that dopamine rush. And I remember posting it. It didn't perform as well, but I'm being penalized from the management team that this post, whatever. And it's just kind of like, well, that wasn't what my followers are expecting, and just learning, taking that and kind of twisting it into my own personal content that I've also made. But if it hits one person and it really impacts one person, I feel like that post was successful, and that needed to be okay with me, and not it going viral, I've never really honestly expected anything to go viral. I think that that's absolutely absurd. But if it like helps one person, something that you posted, something that you shared, something that you said, because it doesn't always have to be Instagram, right? I think that it was worthwhile, and then it'll increase.
Yeah, man. And I think that mindset is so important to have in the beginning, because if you're always, and it sucks that we're conditioned to think about virality and just impressions and reach and how many people will see this thing or even react to this thing. Because I think when we take the approach of impact first, it allows us to push through and be more consistent, because the reality of it is 9 times out of 10 when you're not consistent and you don't have like a valid excuse, like Jordan, you're literally running a whole business and doing all the things, so you're fine. But for those of us who, really want to create a platform that thrives in that space, I think 9 times out of 10, a lack of consistency just comes from unrealistic expectations. And you even mentioned that earlier, right? Like managing expectations about your time, in my case, but also managing expectations about, like, if you have 300 followers, sis, you only probably gonna get seen by, 50 of them people, and you probably only gonna get maybe 5 interactions. You know what I mean? Like you have to be realistic about what is the reality of whatever post or whatever, if we're talking about social media. But I also think the reality of the intention behind leveraging something like social.
Yeah.
And I could talk about this topic all day long, like being in the influencer space, working in corporate in the influencer space. And it's like everyone wants to I'm not going to say be an influencer because I don't like when people say that, but everyone wants to like experience those benefits. Everyone wants to have, you know, that viral moment. Everyone wants to like be popular on social. And I think a lot of it kind of stems from not understanding like your why, not having tough enough skin. I mean, even sometimes I look at myself and I'm like, girl, it's okay. It's okay that that
Yeah.
post didn't do numbers. That doesn't mean that
Yeah.
you just have to scratch out your content calendar for the remainder of the month. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So,
And also with that is something that any of us are interested in. And a lot of us have made our own content, but just knowing it is work. It is work. And a lot of very successful influencers or ambassadors have done this for hours, and they have really, they've been there kind of not from the beginning, I wouldn't say, because you can start today. You can absolutely start today, but they've been consistent, right? And they have been very thoughtful and intentional in how they want to present their content. And the impact is there. Like you mentioned, having impact is really so important. So it's just really, what are the metrics that we're measuring? And if you only have 300 followers, that is okay. Provide value to those 300 followers or those 300 email subscribers, wherever you're trying to get a message across, provide value there. And incrementally things will grow as you keep adding more strategy to it.
no, favorite word is strategy, but 100%. So let's talk about execution a little bit because you kind of just gave me a little light bulb moment too. Even whether it be execution on social, right? If you're a content creator, whether it be execution in your business, at what point did you start taking execution seriously? Or at what point did you realize like, okay, cool, there's that moment where you can be as strategic as you want to be, you can plan as much as you want to be, but it has to be developed and it has to be executed in order for the real thing to come to life. What, talk to me about that? Because I first of all, your face, anybody, I wish I could see Jordan right now. But it's like, it's a real thing. And I know that you know that pain just from your reaction, because I am currently going through it. And I feel like I'm not the only one that experiences this or has experienced this. And I know that you're someone that has definitely gotten over that curve, but I would love to know your
Yeah.
point of view, you know?
And not always. It could very much seem like that. There's, you know, it's crazy because I always think about how many ideas I have and then how many ideas my team has, how many ideas our clients have. And I'm like, I just walk around with like buku ideas from so many people all the time. And I'm like, you know, there's not enough to really, so you have to know that it's going to take a lot of ideas to get one that really is like the best. And I will recommend probably 2 books off top that help you compartmentalize. All right, how do I get this thing from, you know, 0 to 100? The first one is Show Your Work by Austin Kleon. If you're familiar with that, if you're not, great book, or go read it again. I need to go read it again. The second one is The Practice by Seth Godin. And both of those books come to mind first when we think about how to just do it. And it, you know, no Nike, like literally you just have to do it sometimes. And you have to know that the more things that you get off and you publish or you share or you experiment with, I don't know, you show it to some world, the more things that you put out there, the more and more, the better you'll get. And the more you'll make more shots later on, if that makes sense, right? He's like, just shoot your shot. Like you go to the arcade and you play the basketball game, you shooting. Do that with your creative work so you can see what you make and then do more of those.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Do you feel like people don't get to that point more than oftentimes than not because they're thinking about the results too soon? Or do you think that, because that's where my mind goes when I think about why I might be in a place of stuckness, right? Of showing the work, of doing the work. It's just more so I'm like light years ahead of the idea because I'm already thinking about how people will react to it. I'm already thinking about how well it will perform. I'm already thinking about, you know what I mean? Like if it'll resonate. Or do you think that there are also other factors that kind of fall into play?
I think that's definitely a big one. You mentioned conviction, and I think we've also talked about commitment. I think as the person who has made something and is going to share something, we have to make sure we're committed to ourselves, and we're almost congratulating or patting ourselves on the back for just doing it. And it's not about the result, right? It is a little different times when you have investors involved, or there's, maybe there is a lot of money on the line. But when we're talking about the first few drafts or the first few iterations of something, or it's like there should not be any expectation, in my opinion. And the expectation is to carry the job out, and then to do it better a second time, and to repeat it a third time and take it to another level, and then do it a fourth time, and then do it a fifth time. So however many, I think I also have either read somewhere or picked up somewhere around, I don't know if it was someone committing to like recording like 100 podcasts. They were like, it don't matter, I'm going to record 100 podcasts, because you find on 15, 20, 25, 30, 60, you just got way better. The content got way better. It got way faster. You got more followers now, subscribers.
You are speaking the truth right now. And I think it goes back to that iteration phase. And I think naturally, like the way that our minds work, it's just, or the way that we're wired, like it's required. Like we almost need that, need to see the same thing in different capacities, need to experience a scenario multiple times in different ways to just become like experts in that area. And that's another thing I won't get into today, but we also just have to let ourselves grow and learn,
The
right?
grace.
Because yes, the grace, like we're at the end of the day, both you and I are fairly young, God willing. And it's like, we see more life, but we haven't scratched the surface.
Yeah.
And oftentimes like that's the reminder where it's like, okay, you're taking this way too serious, sis. You got to chill out. Like you have to
And I
relax.
do that same thing where I'm in my head, you're in your head, we're in our heads. I'm in my head about what it is, and it's like it really ain't nothing. And
Yeah.
I think that those two books that I mentioned, like those can really, at any given time, you can maybe go back to a couple of the concepts shared in those and just let it go. Like just release the art, share the photo, write the caption, post the article, and let it be.
I love that. I love that. Well, I'm glad that we could cover off on that, because I think that that's something that a lot of people experience, whether or not they know how to articulate it. And it's like an epiphany and conviction type of moment. But it's also something you have to actively work at, right? It's not just like, oh, this great idea just came to me and I'm so inspired to make it happen. I think the feeling is more like, damn, you know?
Yeah, because I think the addition to that is being able to do it again. Like you can do something once, and that's great too, but committing to doing it again, and then doing it again and repeating it, so you can really refine this process that you're after. And that's where I think you strike gold. Consistency.
Yeah. Listen, bars, consistency, drops mic, because that's never going to change. Well, okay, I don't want to harp on this too long, because people are probably like, okay, we get it. But I do want to talk a little bit about Raire Label. We kind of touched on starting the business earlier and what got you to this point, but y'all have been doing some really dope things lately. And if you're not familiar with the team, if you're not familiar with the business, I definitely encourage you to visit rairelabel.com. That's RAIRE label.com, because they just so that you can see the work. I wish this was like a visual moment where I could share my screen, because I would totally just scroll through the landing page. But y'all have been doing some really dope things. I think the latest project / event that I was most inspired by, I think just because I'm the target audience, but y'all did the Aveda event for Essence fest.
Yes.
And it was fire, y'all, from the email, because I get the emails and I actually open them, not only because I want to support, but because I'm actually interested. But from like the email, external marketing comms to the actual activation and what I was able to see, because I didn't get to go to Essence, but what I got to see from social and like recap, and then Jordan's behind the scenes from like literally setting up what it looks like decals and wallpapers. I'm like, this is a beast. This is a beast. And I'm already knowing like that was an experience, but I would love to just like know what that was like, what that experience was like, how you felt. I felt invigorated just watching it, because I'm like, this is their bread and butter right here. But correct me if I'm wrong. Let me know.
Thank you a ton for following along, for opening the emails. I think I can speak for our team too. We're proud of our emailer. We, don't send out too much, spammy things at all. I can't talk. But thank you for following along and just seeing how I shared that from, my personal point of view, and seeing what the actual high level marketing looked like. We really took that project from nothing to what it was, and we built something in such a way that we are hopeful to be able to do this again, whether it is for Essence Festival next year or in another market. And what that looks like, I think, to kind of give you some insight on the process there, is we're looking around a few months before Essence Festival and how we wanted to be involved with Essence Festival. It had been a while since it was back in New Orleans, or, that not back in New Orleans, but it had, taken place, and just bouncing ideas around. We talked about this for months, just ideas, not the execution of it. We had, I think, between 6 and 8 weeks to execute all of that, but we were really throwing around a lot of ideas, right? Not every idea made the cut. So we got to our best idea after a while, and we found, or we were able to work with amazing partners. So Neal Corporation is an Aveda distributor, and they were able to help us all get Aveda involved at a national level, and their texture team came in. Just a quick background on the educational initiatives that Aveda has around textured hair. They're not going away. We're going to see more of that coming up, and they're really putting a lot of effort into their institutes. Louisiana is the first state to require texture hair education in cosmetology school. Hopefully that's going to happen across, the country. And Aveda is a big part of that, since they have institutes all across the country. So we had great partners. The support that we received on site, actually building out the things with our fabrication team, sound team, just all types of people who were involved in the production, and then being able to host. I think we hosted like 600 or 700 guests. So women getting their hair done, hair massages, listening to speakers, yoga in the morning. It was really, I have to say, it was as amazing as I hope that you experienced it through the stories.
Yes, I'm like sitting here smiling and just so excited, because number one, I love experiences and I love community. And that's like a goal of mine for the Mind in Detail, right? Is just to like extend beyond the digital space and really bring joyous events, but also like tangible, not, like experiences. I won't even say takeaways, but we've been through the women empowerment brunch phase. We've been through like the Instagrammable conference phase, but what about the things that actually matter? And I think partnering with a brand like Aveda, who is requiring, things like textured education or knowledge within their institutions, that's an initiative, and that's a partnership that you just know is directly impactful for both the team and the community and the brand. Like everyone wins in that situation. That's just like a perfect scenario,
Definitely proud to have been able to lead that. And I think that you just said something that's a part of like our culture at Raire, is everyone wins. We want to make sure everybody is contributing and is involved at the level that they want to be involved at. and everybody's kind of doing their part so we can all win. I love that.
Wow, look at me just knowing y'all's mission and like employee onboarding book. Okay. add me to the team. I think I'm ready. But no,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm glad that y'all had that experience. Definitely excited to see what happens, what comes in the near future. And it also just made me want to ask, does Raire Label have an end goal? Like, is there not necessarily an end goal as in like the end of this era, but when you think about specific executions or like what will be the ultimate success, I'm sorry, what does that look like?
At the moment, I know we're really working towards more ownership over projects that we're a part of. And I mean, that looks like experiential events with what we did during Essence Festival. That looks like Raire Label exclusive productions. I wouldn't necessarily say events, but we'll see, right? And even venture and like investing in other ideas, right? And other organizations. So that would be some of the end goal that we're working towards.
I love that. I really do. And I'm excited to see, I said this before, but I really am excited to see it all come to fruition because I know y'all can literally execute whatever you put your minds to. And that's why I just love working with you so much.
Thank you much.
Okay, well, before we like truly start to wrap this up, I do want to talk more about Jordan, the person, the human being. I mean, that's what this platform is about, right? Like connecting people to people, sharing stories. How do you take care of yourself, right? Like with all the moving parts going on in your world, what are practical things that you do to maintain just a level head? We know about the cold showers. Well, at least I know about the cold rinses. I don't know if you're still keeping those up, but like, what are practical things that you're doing? And we could look at it as self-care, but more so like just to keep a level head, just to maintain that like balancedness.
It's wild you brought up the cold rinse. I did one this morning and I really was like, I wonder if people think I don't do this anymore because I don't post about it. And sure enough, I do. It is a routine that I've kept now for over 3 years, since 2019. Yeah. And that's part of my morning routine. It was a little difficult to take a cold rinse in New Orleans during the summer, so I kind of took a break, not on purpose, but the cold water is back now since everything is cooling off. Anyways, yeah, a morning routine.
Wait, y'all lost cold water? I did not know that.
No, it's not that we lost it. It's just that like it was so hot, the water wasn't coming out cold ever.
It's like lukewarm.
Yeah, and I'm like, this isn't okay.
This isn't like getting me ready for my day. It's not shaking me back. Like, it's not
Yeah,
triggering my mind. It's just like
it
a
is
lukewarm water.
not cold
Okay.
at all. So yeah, that was interesting the last, few months to want to do that routine, but really not have access to cold water. And the part of my morning routine after that would just be, I enjoy breathing exercises or need breathing exercises, even if it's just for a few minutes, working out or some sort of movement, right? I don't know if that's a walk some days. Maybe I only have time for 20 minutes of yoga, right? A lot of times though, I try to hit the gym so I can run a mile, lift some weights, do the whole nine. You know what I'm talking about. You do the same. And that helps me day to day kind of make sure I'm good before I dip into everything else and get the day started, emails and client work.
It's a real thing. I didn't realize how much I needed fitness, how much I needed quiet time in the morning. I think that is like the newest addition to my routine because I have been working out, like you said, I've been working out too for a while now, like at least 2 years, almost 3 years straight, with no reason, right? We're not athletes anymore, so it's like it's just the discipline. But one thing I did start implementing into my routine probably like maybe Q2 of this year, because I was struggling, man. Like I was struggling to find time. I was struggling to have quiet time, just like prayer. You know what I mean? Like just being very like zen, for lack of better words. But I started waking up like 5 a.m., 5:30, right now I am coming off of a bit of traveling, but I always notice like when I do stop it, whether it be for like a week or a couple days, I am like, my body is like fiending to get back to that point, because once the world wakes up and everyone else is around asking you questions, needing answers to those questions, and you have work to do, it's like, man, I just want to breathe and not talk to anyone. So
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
your brain needs it. And especially when it comes to like moving my body, my brain needs it at this point.
Yeah, I've made sure that I set about 3 hours. It doesn't always happen, this way, but 3 hours in the morning that allow me to just do the things that I need to do before I really, okay, now I'm available to anything that needs my attention. And I know that that's not realistic sometimes for everyone, but at least finding what is realistic for you and committing to that. Something new that I have added and I'm trying to implement more is a night routine, because that was something that I didn't really have, was a night routine and what those moments looked like and what those rituals were. So I'm allowing myself, when it makes sense, about an hour to do those things.
That's good. And I feel like you need unwinding just as much as you need like getting ready for the day. And I love that. I used to have a night routine. So you just remind me, I should probably, like, skincare is not a night routine. A night routine is like putting your phone away, like
Yeah.
making a cup of tea, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
listening to whatever music or
Skincare
whatever
routine is
vibes.
skincare
Right.
routine.
I know. I feel like my night routine is like, okay, 5 minutes of skincare. Cool. Let's watch
Yeah.
Netflix or something. And that's fine too. You know what I mean? But I like that you mentioned that, because I think it's just as important to like let the day kind of, wear itself
It's
off a
a
little
whole
bit.
it's a whole sport out here. It's really a sport. And that's why I'm really big on everybody finding what physical activity is best, for them. And I know, we all have our own. So I wouldn't want to sit here and talk about like, oh, well, this is what I do. This is different for all of us, but it's really a sport. Like life is a sport and we we need to keep up with it.
No, I totally agree. Well, before we truly head out, I want to know, are there any new projects that you're working on that you're ready to speak about publicly?
I'll share a tidbit. I am excited that we are working on a platform to really share on demand information around how to execute an idea, a project, a brand, a business. So this is the very first time that I am saying this publicly, and let's check back in about a year. I'm really excited.
That sounds really dope. I'm going to be tuning in, and I know as soon as y'all do release it, I will be sharing with my audience, because I know that that's something like, we love resources, right? You mentioned those two books
Yes.
earlier, which I thought was dope. I'm going to actually put those in the show notes. I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget. Show your work and the practice. And I think also the cold rinses will also go in the show notes, because I feel like that's something practical that people can actually try. I remember you had done like a what do you call it? Like a, not a competition, but
A
like,
challenge.
yeah,
Yeah.
a
Yep.
challenge. There we go, a
Mhm.
challenge. I couldn't find the word clearly. And I think that that's really cool. And I'm like, people should like try it. These are things you can try. Like they don't
That's
have to work, but just try it.
that is what I love about the cold rinse and different things like that is I honestly try to not connect too much with material things for when I need certain nourishment, or when I am not feeling 100%. I really try to connect with things that are practical. Cold rinse will be your best friend. Give it 30 days, 5 seconds a day.
And then try to extend it after that 5 seconds. Like as
Correct.
you incrementally, like you said before. Well,
Correct.
Jordan, thank you so much for joining us. I've truly loved our conversation. I truly just love, you know, just shooting it with you. But before we like, really head out, where can the people find you? I want to make sure that my audience becomes your audience, because I'm sure that will also become like super fans of everything you're doing.
Thank you much. I am around on Instagram mostly at I am Jordan Rhea. And if you want to check out the agency, that is at Raire Label, RAIRELABEL. So reach out, hit us up, and we'll talk soon. Thank you, Khaila.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much, everyone.